Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of Attendance Bias. I am your host, Brian Weinstein. I'm not a parent, but something that I frequently hear from my friends who have kids is that one of the best parts of being a parent is that you get to see the world and the things you love through the eyes of your kids. If that is a benefit of having kids, then today's guests must be two of the happiest people in the world of Phish. Those guests today are Bobby and Oliver from the Phish Phry podcast, a father and son duo who are doing a deep dive into Phish's studio albums, and they release biweekly podcast episodes to talk about their impressions of each album. It's an informative and fun listen. For today's episode of Attendance Bias, though, Bobby and Oliver chose to talk about an excerpt from their first show, Oblivion and Chalkdust Torture, from July 11th, 2023 at the Orion Amphitheater in Huntsville, Alabama. This was the first live show for both father and son, and it ended with a wallop. Not only do we get to talk about studio recordings, first shows, and new songs, but a certain guitarist makes a special guest appearance that made this first show extra memorable and meaningful for both Bobby and Oliver. But that's not my story to tell. Let's join Bobby and Oliver as we talk about Oblivion, Chalkdust Torture, and more from July 11th, 2023 at the Orion Amphitheater in Alabama. Bobby and Oliver, thank you so much for being on Attendance Bias. Welcome, and how are you two doing today?
I'm doing good.
I'm doing good.
Great. Those of you listening to this podcast episode, you should know that we are recording right in the middle of Phish's summer tour. So we have a lot going on, although the show that we're talking about today was played right at the beginning of Phish's summer tour, and that is on July 11th, 2023 at the Orion Amphitheater in Huntsville, Alabama. And although we'll talk about the show, we're only really focusing on two parts, Oblivion into Chalkdust Torture, which, Bobby, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it was played at the very end of the second set.
Yes.
Before we get into that, and we'll talk about, the summer tour as it's going on, we'll talk about the music, and we'll hear about you guys a lot. Before we get into all of that, the two of you co-host a podcast, a really fun podcast called Phish Phry, which is, of course, the word fish and Phry, for those of you who want to jump on and search for it after this episode. Bobby, can you give us a quick summary, like the elevator pitch in maybe 2 or 3 sentences? What is Phish Phry when people find it and press play?
Yeah. So the idea was basically, I've been a Phish fan roundabout since about 2004. And then Oliver just had to listen to Phish in the truck as he rode with me. So as I got more into him, the idea was we would just start listening to albums and talk about it from the point of view of new listeners. Because I really jumped in deep probably about a year ago. And so that's when Oliver started listening. And so we just listen to an album, talk about it, and kind of give our thoughts and how it is for new listeners.
So, Bobby, I know you said you've been in since 2004. Have you listened to these albums all the way through at any point in your life, or is this like a new concept for you too?
So a little of both. I first started with Billy Breathes, and that was kind of the first one I listened to front to back. Phish was always in my world, but not like a super deep fan until probably about May of 2022. And I just kind of went off the cliff and just started listening to everything, all the studio albums, a lot of the live stuff, anything that was pretty much on Apple Music at the time. Since then, more of like the audience recordings and things like that. But so the idea was just, let's listen to this album, Oliver, and then give our thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
Oliver, let me ask you, how long did it take for you to get comfortable talking about Phish, knowing that people or complete strangers might press play and listen to you? Is it something you're still working with, or do you feel comfortable now in front of a microphone?
So whenever my dad said, let's just start a podcast, let everybody know about Phish, I was like, that's a great idea. I was like, snapped straight into it. First one, I was like, I'm not used to like being on recorded.
Yeah.
And so I usually just do videos for Nora Wall and Simon. But yeah.
Do you think you're comfortable yet, though?
I'm comfortable.
There you go.
Yeah, you could tell from your podcast. Something I really like about your podcast is the episodes are very quick. They're only about anywhere between 8 and maybe 20 minutes, I think, generally speaking. I really like that because other podcasts that I listen to, sometimes including mine, can go for an hour. And sometimes you just want a quick bite.
Yeah.
You know, like if you have a drive that's only like 20 minutes from point A to point B, it's good to just hear a snippet, but still have some depth to it. Oliver, something I really liked, I want to give you a compliment now. Something I really liked in your episode, I think it was about Junta, was you said something you liked about Phish is that they use their imaginations. Mm-hmm. And I think it's something that a lot of listeners know, but don't really think about that way. Do you remember what kind of music, what song or what type of songs you were listening to that made you think that?
Yes, I remember the first time when I heard Phish, You Enjoy Myself, I was like loving it. Like, we were about to do our podcast. And so I told my dad with my iPad, I was like, I love You Enjoy Myself. And so I liked it. It was like fun whenever you got to say like boy. And then
it always is. That never goes away. It's always fun. Something else I remember you said about Divided Sky in that same episode is that it kind of sounds like it could come from Moana.
Yeah.
And Moana is one of my favorite movies. And I didn't think it on my own, but when I heard you say it, I'm like, yeah, it absolutely could. Especially in the beginning and the end, like when she comes back and she gives the heart of Te Fiti to everyone. I could hear Divided Sky playing in the background.
Yeah.
Someone needs to make an edit of that and post it online.
Disney might have something to say about that.
That's true. Maybe don't do that.
So, Bobby, what album are you up to by now?
Actually, as of this recording, we just released Farmhouse. So we've done 9 album reviews so far.
Yeah, we're listening to the second disc.
We are.
Oh, that's fun. So are you're including a live one, I would guess, right? I haven't listened to the whole podcast yet.
We haven't done a live one yet because
that's on part 2.
Yeah, our future plans are to dive into live albums.
Right.
So we have not done a live one though. According to chronologically, we should have already done that one. But I decided just to stick with the studio albums, just to kind of give us a good baseline. And when we started, we had not seen Phish live yet. So I didn't have a real frame of reference for it, and nor did Oliver. So now that we've been to a Phish concert, we have a little bit more
experiencing.
Yep.
Hearing live. Because first time I heard live, I was like, it doesn't sound just like the studio albums, because I love hearing them like perfect and stuff, because I'm used to doing that. But then whenever I heard like live albums, I was like, they could play it perfect sometimes. Yeah. So like most of the ones that they put on live albums are the good ones.
Yeah. And with all the jams.
Yeah.
Yeah. And sometimes when they don't play it perfect, it leads to something brand new, which could be the best part. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but that's kind of what you making me think. Like, I love seeing Phish sometimes because of the mistakes, sometimes it brings them to a new place.
Absolutely. It's in those mistakes that sometimes they find their way out and then into just a beautiful moment in a jam.
Yeah. So I'm a teacher. It's a lesson for all of us. Sometimes mistakes lead us to our best accomplishments.
That's right.
Whenever you said that, it reminded me of like bouncing around the room. Mm-hmm. But like when it said like breaking out of the room, or no, that was a different
That's a different song.
Yeah, but it reminded me of that.
Yeah, finding your way out. Yeah, it's good.
Oliver, what's your favorite album so far? You don't have to write it in stone. It might change tomorrow. I'm just curious at this moment, what's your favorite album?
I like Hoist.
I love Hoist too.
That's a good one.
Bobby, how about you? Even though you're familiar with most of these albums beforehand, has your thinking or opinion about these albums shifted at all? Because now you're listening to them with a different focus or through a different lens.
There's a special place in my heart for Billy Breathes. It's the first one I listened to. And I feel like that one is probably generally in my top 5. But one that's growing on me more and more as I listen to it is Fuego from 2015. Mm-hmm. Interesting note about that, and I didn't realize this until listening to some different live stuff, is they recorded some of the background vocals and horns for that literally like 3 miles away from us at Fame Studios in Muscle Shoals. And so then I was kind of like, oh, so that one holds a little bit more special place in my heart just because it's kind of hometown. But I think that one I don't really know if I have adequate words for it, but I feel like it kind of was a new era in Phish, if that makes any sense.
Fuego
But
was.
and so I think for me, that one is one of my new favorites for sure. So, but it changes.
Yeah, well, I could tell you for sure when they played Fuego live, not the song, but when they called it Wingsuit, right, in 2013, that was definitely a new era for Phish, where they're taking a huge risk of playing an entire album. You know, we've all been to concerts where the band says, all right, we're going to play a new one now, and everyone gets up and goes to the bathroom or goes to get something to eat or drink. They did that for like 80 minutes.
Wow.
And it was a huge risk, but it was a turning point where they could say, we are who we are. We're going to play what we're going to play, and we hope you're with us, but we're going to do it anyway. So I would agree with you there that it's a turn, or Fuego was kind of a turning point. Let me ask you one last thing before we remind everyone what the podcast is called. First, you, Bobby, and then Oliver. I'm curious, do you have any favorite songs that aren't on any albums?
At the risk of sounding redundant, I do feel like Oblivion is probably my new favorite. And I know it's not on anything yet. And I don't know if there's any that are on any albums. Go for it.
I like 2001.
Me too. I love it when they play that.
Never thought I'd say this because, like, first time I heard it, it just felt like a UFO was coming down. I was like, oh my, I don't like this. And then finally, like 2 days later, I was like, Alexa, play 2001. And then I was like jamming out with the and, I remember when the lights just went straight up in the sky, and I loved it.
Oh yeah.
I never thought I would say that.
It was great live.
Yeah.
So just to remind everyone listening, Bobby, can you give us a quick summary, the name of the podcast, what people can expect, and where they can find it?
Yeah. So it's Phish Phry Podcast, all PHs. We're pretty much everywhere on social.
Even on Threads
now. You can find us on any of the podcast listing sites, Phish Phry Podcast. And pretty much it's just us listening to an album, and then every 2 weeks we put out a new podcast with our thoughts. And one of the questions that we ask a lot is, would you give this to someone who doesn't know about Phish?
What do you think?
Would this be a good album to hand someone if they're brand new to Phish? And so I think we kind of come at it from that point of view. It's just brand new fans.
So the next segment of Attendance Bias, we heard about you as podcast hosts. I want to hear about you as fans with the Attendance Bias Lightning Round.
Attendance Bias Lightning Round.
So, Bobby, when was your first Phish show, and what do you remember about it?
Well, this one's pretty easy because my first Phish show is part of the show we're talking about today. So 7/11/23 was my very first Phish show.
Wow.
Our first Phish show. Like I said, I've been a fan since 2004, but at the time I wasn't enough of a fan to make a journey to go see them. And they don't play Alabama a whole lot, or not like close in Alabama.
It's rare.
So I just never took the time or invested the money to go check them out until this year. And so this year was like, I had to. They're too close. It's an hour away. And I think that one of the things that it was their first time in Huntsville. Yeah. And so
that was pretty cool.
Summer tour opener, first time in Huntsville. I think the thing I remember most about it, other than the crazy heat, was really just how nice and inviting all the fans around us were. I think that was one of the things that stood out most to me, other than the music and Phish themselves, was just how nice everybody was.
Like when we were just unloading, getting out of the car, he showed me these like cool semi trucks that like held all their band, and then they had like their stuff. And then he showed me like the RVs, and it had like a gate. He showed me the RVs, like that's where they come out, and like the buses. And so then he's like, I'm just looking around and not even looking over there. And so I'm just over here, just like, looking over there. And then you're just like, Oliver. And then I'm like, I look over there and I like wave at Trey because we get to see him. And then he comes over to the fence and I give him a handshake, and we talk about, you say something to him, and I'm just over here.
What did you guys talk about?
I didn't say. I just said I'm one of your biggest fans.
Yeah, it kind of caught us by surprise. Obviously, first Phish show, and I basically shoved Oliver over to the fence because I thought it was Trey, and then obviously it was. And so he comes over and he goes, "Here, shake my hand." So we reach our hands through the fence, and Oliver says, "I'm a really big fan." He goes, "Oh, well, I'm so nice to meet you." And I just thanked him for coming to Huntsville, and he said, "It's going to be a great show." And that was it. But it was one of those things where it's like, I told her, I said, "Well,
Yeah.
we've peaked now."
Whenever we were going to the tents,
Yeah.
you're just still like, what?
I was just like, what in the world?
And then we get like a free character 0. It's on both of our iPads, but it had like pixel tray, and then like in a 4, like 5 black boxes, and then in the middle it had like a pixel looking 0. So it had Trey, Paige, and then in the middle if there was a 0, and then a John Fishman, and then Mike.
Is that a sticker you're talking about?
Yeah, it's like a sticker.
Cool.
It's
So you
a-
got some free stickers. You got to meet Trey.
I mean, we peaked. I mean, every other Phish show we go to now is going to be kind of a little bit of a letdown.
and nobody could.
Yeah, so it was a pretty landmark show.
Now let me ask you about Huntsville a little bit. So my understanding, Huntsville is northern Alabama.
Correct.
Okay, and where the Phish, I'd have to do a stat check on this, but where they're more likely to play is probably where, like, Tuscaloosa.
Yeah, Tuscaloosa, Birmingham, they're kind of middle central of the state, and I think
They
played,
played at Orange Beach,
and then they played
and
Orange
golf
Beach,
stores.
which is south.
Yeah.
But yeah, the closest shows for us would have been Tuscaloosa, and I think they played there in 2021.
Yeah,
But
I didn't know about Phish at all.
Well, a question I ask every guest I ever have on here is, what is the weirdest thing you've ever seen at a Phish show? So I would have to put the condition when I ask the two of you is you can't say meeting Trey, because I think you've answered that part already. Other than meeting Trey Anastasio from the show that you went to, what's one weird thing that you remember?
So there's these elevators by like the employees only, and it leads up to like a top deck. And there's this guy with a cape during Haley's comment that was just spinning around trying to make his cape go. And what they were doing, I'm going down, and like the whole song is just. And then the next song he was on the other side doing it, and then he was throwing out like
glow sticks.
Yeah, glow sticks, and it was fun.
And then later on, he was spinning and had lights on his cape.
Yeah.
That was.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
He was just like, the first time I saw him during Haley's comment, I was like, oh, look at him.
Yeah.
And then we just kept looking at him for like a long time until we focused back on the show.
Yep.
You know, it's funny. Last night, I took a friend to his first show, and he said he didn't see the guy with the cape, but what he did say to me was, when you look at the lights, it's like being in a trance for a long time. And when you just said that, describing looking at the guy in the cape, it reminded me of what my friend said.
Yeah, like the lights person, I keep forgetting his name, but like whatever he finds out what he can do with the lights, he just does it and like starts pressing buttons. And so like he just like the lights, they like stand from up here and then they like move.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there was this one time when they were all in circles, but the lights on I think it was 555.
Yeah.
They were like went so bright whenever I said 555.
Super bright.
Yeah.
Blindingly.
If they did white, it was just like this. So I had to do like this was the same hat that I was wearing. I was like, trying to look through this.
So Oliver's trying to cover his face with his hat, by the way, for those of you listening who can't see. Bobby, what's the weirdest thing you saw at your show?
The weirdest thing, I don't know if it's necessarily would be considered weird, but just how many people came from super far away to Huntsville, Alabama to see Phish. I met someone from San Diego. There was a lady sitting close to us from New Jersey, and then somebody else sitting near us from like, I think he said he just moved.
Tampa Bay.
Yeah, like just the draw of people to come to Huntsville, Alabama, which is not like a major market by any by any means. It's not a Nashville or Atlanta or anything, but just it was weird to me. Like, y'all are coming to Huntsville, Alabama to see Phish, and there's other shows around, So I think that would probably be the weirdest thing. Yeah, that's probably my weird thing.
When was this show played?
So this is the first time, I think, that a guest has chosen a show or a jam from a tour that is still going on while we are recording. So normally in this segment of the podcast, I like to talk about Phish's history a little bit and what is going on in the band in terms of their music and the fan base during it. But it's really difficult for me to think of a way to frame the context of this tour while it's still going on before it's over. So what I can say that is, even though we're in the middle of summer tour, Phish has already played 23 shows in this calendar year, right? All the way from Mexico to where we are today. Also, Trey has played a handful of shows with Tab. And I think this is really important. Both he and Phish have debuted a significant amount of new material, which has increasingly starting to pop up in Phish's set lists, including one of them that the two of you chose for this episode. I thought that overall Mexico this year was strong, even if it was a little inconsistent, in my opinion. But the band certainly seems focused, and they're ready to improvise at the drop of a hat. They don't seem like they're wandering very much. And also something that I've noticed, Tweezer will always be like old reliable when it comes to jamming. Like, you could always go to Tweezer if you just want to jam and improvise. But it seems that songs like A Wave of Hope, Oblivion, Soul Planet, Ruby Waves, they're taking the place of a lot of old time jam vehicles.
Yeah.
And they're kind of helping out to the point where people, and I used to be this way, who would complain when one of those new songs start, you got to eat your words because you never know how great it's going to be once they get going. So today's show, though, which was July 11th of this year, 2023, at the Orion Amphitheater in Huntsville, northern Alabama, as we discussed, bordering Tennessee. And it seems like the venue was almost brand new. So I wanted to ask, what did you expect going in musically? And can you tell us a little bit about the venue? Because it seemed like everybody loved it.
I don't know. I mean, there's
a lot to choose from of what they expected. And I thought it was gonna be either Your Pet Cat or there's this, what is it called, that was like When You Got on Mars.
Oh, the Martian Monster.
Yeah, I thought it was gonna be that or Possum.
Yeah, we have a laundry list of songs we'd love to see.
Yeah.
So, and then, I mean, judging off what I heard from Mexico, they could have played anything. And given that it's the 40th anniversary, like, it was kind of like, I have no idea what to even expect from what they're going to be playing. We had some songs that we'd like, this would be great to see live.
Yeah,
this would be fun.
Down part where we just had a full bucket.
Yeah. Oliver had a literal laundry list, bucket full of songs he would have loved to have seen and heard live. And then some of them they actually played night one and night two. I think honestly for us, it was just kind of like first time seeing Phish.
What do you expect?
We're gonna eat whatever they put in front of us. We're gonna love it all. And so,
and like, what was surprising was earlier that day I was listening to the song that they opened with.
Which was?
Yeah, what song was that?
It was Blaze On.
Blaze On opener. That was pretty.
It was like
it was pretty.
The
awesome.
lights went. In the worst days are gone, like with purple lights.
Yeah, it was really hot.
Yeah.
So Blaze On was appropriate that way too.
Yeah.
But I think
for those of you listening, just so you know, if you go to Phish Phry, both Bobby and Oliver do have a 2-part recap of this show. So it's worth listening to, not just for the album reviews and the album recaps, but also you got professionals here reviewing the shows that they've been to also. Guys, can you tell us a little bit about this amphitheater? Because I feel like I'm only experiencing this through social media because I didn't have any plans to go to Huntsville. It seemed really far away. And so to me, what I read and heard from a lot of people on different social media sites is no one knew anything about it. about the Orion Amphitheater. So did you know about it going in, like in terms, had you been there before, or was this brand new to everyone?
I think
You've been there before with Nora.
So I did take my daughter to go see a concert there. It was the first time I'd been there back in March. And I knew we had tickets to see Phish. And so I was really kind of scoping out the whole venue from that point of view. Like, I'm ready to see this show with my daughter, but also kind of anticipating the venue full of Phish fans. So the venue opened last year around May, so May of 22. I'm not sure, somehow the guy that is part of the company that helped fund it, create it, whatever, he plays in as a traveling musician. I don't remember which band offhand. So I think he kind of created it from that point of view of something the fans would like and something that artists would appreciate. So I think there's a lot of those little touches in there. It is kind of that Greek, like the Greek in California. I think it's that style of venue.
There is no bad seats there.
There aren't any bad seats. They actually went in. You can, when you're in the venue, you can see they kind of roped off a couple of areas that when they were taking the final tour, they were like, these seats aren't going to be a great experience for the fans. So they just completely blocked off some of those. So I think it's 8,000 seat capacity. They did block off the main parking lot for a shakedown street. And so that was really nice, just right there, right at the venue. And what I saw from the way the Orion was handling Phish, and then I know they got Billy Strings coming in, they just had Widespread Panic, is they really kind of try to cater to that jam band audience. And so shakedowns.
What does that look like?
So I think the way it looked for Phish is they opened up the lot for vendors starting at noon on day of show.
Oh yeah.
And they basically kind of closed it off about 5:30 when doors opened. But inside the venue, they have like custom drinks for the different bands that are kind of tailored.
Oh yeah, they had Wilson.
Yeah, they had a Wilson drink, and then
they had I think it was a Reba drink.
I think so. I remember showing them to you. We didn't try them, but so they really try to cater to the fans. And then after, there was like a after show party. They had like a dome area just outside of the amphitheater, and so they had like a DJ in there and kind of a little after show going. They have several art installations around, so people were taking photos with that. And then the lot was open to I think 12 or 1 for the vendors. So like really just kind of catering to, let's let the vendors have their time, we'll let Phish have theirs, or whatever jam band of the day. And then I do also know that a lot of local breweries and places were having shows, like pre-shows, after shows, and they were doing a lot of stuff there as well. So it really seemed like Huntsville as a whole really was embracing the jam band scene. So I think getting in and out as far as traffic was super easy. I think they were handling that real well.
Though we did have to park a little bit. It was about
it was like a 2-minute walk from where we parked.
And we were just talking about everything. We were like, what do you want to see? And then it was just a big surprise whenever we got to actually see.
If we would have got there early, there was some parking close by around all the vendors. But if not, you're within a 2-minute walk, and there's lots of other restaurants and stuff close by. So Huntsville's really growing as far as our state goes. And so I like the fact that we have an amphitheater here close, and they're bringing in a lot of good acts. And I was really surprised that they brought in Phish, and it was 2 nights that we won't forget.
Hi everybody, Brian here to welcome you to the set break of today's episode of Attendance Bias. First, thank you for listening. And second, just a quick reminder to tell you that even though Attendance Bias comes to you for free, it does take a lot of work, and it does take quite a bit of money to keep the lights on here at production. So I just wanted to ask a small favor, if you could support the podcast in any number of the following ways. If you could leave a review or a rating of it on whichever podcast app you use. If you could spread the word, telling a friend or someone you think may be interested in it about it. Or probably the most concrete way is to go to www.buymeacoffee.com/attendancebias and donate however much you can financially to help with the continuing costs of Attendance Bias. So thank you again so much for listening, and I hope you enjoy the second half of today's episode. So the two of you chose of this show to talk about not the full end of the show, because this only closed the second set. There was still the encore, of course, but Oblivion and Chalkdust Torture. Oblivion was the second to last song of the second set. I always think it's weird to hear a debut, and I would imagine it was especially weird to hear a debut this deep in the show, when you would expect Phish to be in the middle of like a Carini jam or like a really crazy sloth or something like that. So what was the audience reaction, if you remember, when they started this new song that no one knew?
I think everyone knew it was something new, but I think there had been some talk about Oblivion. Maybe I think someone had tweeted that they had sound checked it. And so everyone was kind of a little excited that it might be Oblivion, but nobody was really sure until Trey started singing. And at least the people around us had no clue what song it was. I didn't. And I know all of them.
Until you checked on your phone.
Yeah, until I got a notification, I think from Phish from the road. No, I think it just said Oblivion. I was like, oh, this is what it is. And then Trey started singing it. I think it may have, for people that had seen Phish a lot, I think it might have been a little shocking. For me and Oliver, we were just excited to be along for the ride, but everyone did seem excited once they realized what song it was, at least in the venue itself.
Oliver, do you remember your reaction to a song that you didn't know?
I was like, what is this? And then I asked him and he's like, I don't know either. And then finally, like at that moment, he just gets a notification and he says Oblivion. I think it's a new song. And then I was like, oh, that makes so much more sense.
Well, the first time that I heard it was getting ready to talk to the two of you, was listening to it and writing some notes down. And in my opinion, and I don't know if I still have this opinion listening to it again, but the first time I thought it sounded a little bit like a cross between Steam in terms of the vocal melody, because it's like not so upbeat. It's a little bit darker. And a song that you mentioned earlier, Oliver, Blaze On, because the rhythm kind of sounds like that same Bo Diddley like clave beat, which I really, really like. But what I noticed that doesn't happen on those other two songs is Trey is really stretching his vocal range on this song.
Completely agree. I think you hit it pretty head on with Steam and Blaze On. And I don't remember thinking in the moment it was Steam. Obviously, I'd already played Blaze On, but I don't remember in the moment thinking it was Steam. But I totally see how those two songs kind of combine musically into Oblivion. But Trey's vocals on this, I think, because I think he debuted this while doing his tab shows, if I remember right. Mm-hmm. And so
the way that Trey's voice sounds like, his vocal sounds like Esther a little bit.
Yeah, it is a little more melodic.
Yeah.
But it is a darker
it is
tone.
But it just reminds me of Esther.
But like the Fishification of Oblivion, I think, is something that I'm excited to see where it goes in the future. Obviously, they played it at least one more time, if not twice already, since debuting it. but yeah, I think his vocals were really strong on this, and it gives me a lot of hope for Oblivion in the future.
Yeah, me too. The first thing that grabbed my attention was that Page plays a synthesizer on it at around 2 minutes or 2.5 minutes. And automatically, whenever Page touches the synthesizer, I'm in.
Yes.
I want more of it. I want him to play it more. And then around 4 minutes, they're playing what friends of mine call the bullfrog guitar tone. It's like this very dark, kind of like womp, 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 kind of Trey's guitar. And I'm glad that, because Trey has been like experimenting with this for like the last 5 years or so. So I'm glad that he has finally found a practical use for it. And to your point, Bobby, around 6.5 minutes, I said, I see how this can go deep.
Yeah. I'd made a note that, like, on re-listen, like listening back to it, that around 4, while Trey's leading kind of that instrumental jam that they're starting, the whole band kind of feels a little shaky, but it totally makes sense. It's the first time they've played it live. And so everything feels like they're locked in, but they're not sure really which direction they're going to take this, or like how deep of a jam they're going to get on this. But I really, like I said, makes me hopeful for this song going forward.
Yeah, they were taking it for a test drive, it seemed like, to my ears. And it has hints of I Always Wanted It This Way, which is one of my favorite I say new, but it's been around now for like 7 years. But I was wondering if this might be a replacement for like the synth song that has amazing potential to jam like crazy, because I always think they're going to break out I Always Wanted It This Way, but it never really goes that far out there. But it seems like Oblivion might fit that role in the set list, in the song catalog.
Excited for is like to see what album it's gonna go on. I've like been saying that a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what album is Oblivion gonna go on? Like, because it's Trey Anastasio's like song, but like if it turns into like a Phish studio or a live album, I feel like that'd be like a top hit.
Yeah, I think it's just from the reaction I've seen online about Oblivion, it kind of is becoming a crowd favorite for a new one.
Yeah.
But
I'm sorry, Oliver, I just wanted to ask you, since you've been so used to studio albums and studio tracks, how did you react? How did you feel when they did a lot of jamming and improvising at the show?
I was like, usually when I listen to studio album, it's probably about like the jam's probably about 2 minutes.
Yeah, there's
So, and then like, but then whenever I listened to like started going to the show and hearing the live albums, I was like, is this the same song? So lost in the jam, and I'm like, is this the Mama Dance? Because like they went long with the Mama Dance, and then Twist. I was like, is this Twist or the Mama Dance? I don't know. Like, I get so confused. I'm like, what song is this?
Yeah.
Like,
sometimes they'll hit those type 2 jams. It's like, are we still in the same song they started with, or
like,
is something new?
Asking you like, what song is this again? And then you said it's still the Mama Dance, and I'm like, oh. I was just so confused.
I think one of the things that we've talked about, coming from listening to studio albums up to this point explicitly for the podcast, and then hearing live, is listening for you. In my opinion, you can never know where they're going to take a jam, but kind of listening for like mini peaks, or like little melodies that may hit and then they come back to later, or they may just hit it at one time and kind of keep going. But I think Oliver was one of the things he said that maybe the day after this show we're talking about was you kind of never knew where they might break out a jam.
Yeah,
because there were several unexpected through the night.
It's usually in the middle, but sometimes it's like the beginning, sometimes it's the end. It's rare at the beginning, but
yeah.
But at the end, I remember they did one song where like the jam was at the end, and I think it was Meat Stick.
Yeah, there was a little jam there.
I love Meat Stick.
Yeah.
It's like my favorite song. Especially seeing everybody like jam into it
and dancing.
Yeah.
Did you see everyone do the Meat Stick dance? Did they do it?
Yeah.
We saw this like lady in front of us, and like she loved Phish. Like I was like so surprised to see how much people, but that was over like half. That was like not even close to what they.
Oh yeah, there's a lot.
Yeah, there's a lot. Because like when I first got out of the car and like I saw everybody, I was like, how many people? Like, are these Grateful Dead? Dave Matthews? Because there's so many.
Well, next time they play a festival, you guys will have to come see, and you will see just how many there are, if and when it happens.
Yeah.
But after Oblivion, it's time to close the second set with Chalkdust Torture, which is a classic way to close the set with a punch. I thought that Fishman was a little extra spicy during the very beginning. He was all over the place. I think so far he's been the MVP of this tour.
Just been the family story. I'm bought for the price of the flag and the price. The wind busts the cabin. You speak of your life, or really notice the middle. You're despised, so that's so gone back. You didn't quite match. I'm getting it clear through alternate paths, so make sure when you see the I sat in the chairs and the sense. Told you the job disconnects. I told thoughts follow my vision and dance on the sun. That's the new thing goes through your head. Keep this food alone. And I live what I do. Live what
I would completely agree. One of the notes I had was that Phish and Mike just seem from the very beginning of this show just locked in together.
Yeah, and
just,
especially when they went on the trampolines, I love that.
Yeah,
and you enjoy myself.
But they were really just locked in and just really driving. And I like what you said, that he was extra spicy. And I said this was a great start for a set closer, just when they kick into it and just locked in.
And I noticed that they kind of skipped over some of the instrumental interludes. Like Trey jumped in on the vocals a little earlier than he normally does. And I'm wondering at this point, since it's the end of the second set, are they trying to make a curfew, or are they just so excited that they jump in?
I wondered that too, because I didn't know if there was any curfew for the night, but it was like he jumped in and are just so excited about Summer Tour that we're just skipping over some stuff and just getting right into the jam, or are we, trying to rush through and make a curfew. So it was a great kickoff and great. We're running. Most
of the song is pretty standard, like you would hear on A Picture of Nectar, your normal Chalkdust Torture. But toward the end, when they would normally do that, the climb is what what I would call it. The that part.
I think that it's about to end.
And
then Trey comes back with it. I love that part.
Yeah, I do too. And I always wonder now, because sometimes they don't connect, Fishman and Trey. Like they may not communicate, or one of them has something in mind and the other one doesn't know. And this is one of those times. So it sounds a little bit clumsy at that part. But they recover immediately, and they just get to this amazing jam at the end of Chalkdust Torture that has the same energy as like Tweezer Reprise or something completely different, where if you had only 5 minutes of this whole show to listen to, right? If you had 5 minutes left in your commute and you only had 5 minutes to listen to Phish, and it had to be this show, I would recommend this 7-minute section of Chalkdust Torture.
Oh, when they were about to end, when they hit that thing, I thought they were changing from Chalkdust Torture to something else. Mm-hmm. But then Trey hit that big jam.
Oh yeah. And
I was like, is this a new song? And then it was.
Yeah, the way they were hitting that climb, like you said, and then it was almost kind of like he ripcorded back into a jam, and then everybody, the whole band, just locked back in and just went. But
everybody was surprised.
I agree. The last 5-6 minutes of Chalkdust is just pure energy, just rocking, and it was one of my favorite parts of the night, just for a jam.
So I'd like to ask, before we wrap it up, of the whole show that you guys have, your pick of highlights, what was it about these two parts that you chose to talk about today?
I liked whenever on Chalkdust Torture, whenever it said, "Can I live while I'm young?" Everybody was just like, yeah.
Yeah.
I think what we talked about when we were talking about picking something from this show was really just the energy. And I think coming from Oblivion, a new song, which they're debuting, into Chalkdust was for us, the energy that was creating in Oblivion with the jam they hit in there and just kind of this, nebulous new thing that they're doing into kind of a classic Chalkdust and turned out to be set closer was really just for us a great way to close out the night. So the energy we felt in the amphitheater was really one of the driving forces we had for wanting to pick this just as a way to, kind of sum it all up if we could.
Well, Oliver and Bobby, thank you so much for coming on Attendance Bias today to talk about specifically Oblivion and Chalkdust Torture from July 11th, 2023 at the Orion Amphitheater, but also to talk about your project, the Phish Phry podcast, about getting into Phish, your favorite albums, your favorite songs, and to inform anyone who next time Phish schedules shows at the Orion Amphitheater might say, you know what, it might be worth going. This venue sounds pretty sweet.
It's pretty great. Well, thank you so much for having us on. We love getting the chance to talk to you and love your podcast. So
thank you. All right, guys, until next time, thank you. And that's it for today's episode with Bobby and Oliver of the Phish Phry podcast. And there actually isn't much of a fact check today, but let's just make sure we got everything right with the Attendance Bias fact check.
Attendance Bias fact check.
Bobby says that an album he's gaining appreciation for as he continues his podcast with Oliver is Fuego. He mentioned that it was released in 2015, but it was actually released in June of 2014. In addition, the Halloween show that we talked about, Wingsuit, being the precursor to Fuego, was played on October 31st, 2013 in Atlantic City. The song Oblivion, at the time of this recording, has not appeared on any Phish albums. And finally, for the record, Phish has played Alabama 17 times as of this recording. A quick scan of Phish.net shows that they've played a variety of cities, but most commonly, they have been Tuscaloosa 4 times, Orange Beach 4 times, and Pelham 5 times. But that's it for today's episode of Attendance Bias. I'd like to thank Bobby and Oliver of the Phish Phry podcast for joining me today, Phish.net for its help with the fact check, and Phish.in for the recording used in today's episode. If you enjoy Attendance Bias, please support the show by leaving a rating and a review of it on your favorite podcast app. You could also donate anything you can. Every penny would be appreciated at www.buymeacoffee.com/attendancebias. Thank you again so much for listening, and I'll see you next time on Attendance Bias.